Hi, Sandy.
Amy, good morning. How are you?
Good morning. I am well. How are you?
Good. Spring is almost here. We're getting ready to leave for vacation in Hawaii, and I've never been, so I'm very excited about that.
How much fun.
Yeah.
You know what? I went for the first time about 8 or 9 years ago. I don't know. It's been a few years. I will tell you, it was a life-changing trip because we were on two different islands. I got to walk on warm lava. I got to swim with sea turtles. I got to see whales. Like I kept like going, check, check, check. And I was like, this
Wow.
is
Okay,
so
I'm getting
cool.
excited.
I know. So you'll have a great time.
I won't stress over packing today. I'll think about how it's all going to be worth it.
It'll be worth it. It's very worth it. So enjoy, enjoy, enjoy.
Yay.
Okay, so today we're talking about digital body language. And this kind of came out of I saw the writer of this digital body language book, Erica Duhwan, speak, gosh, fall of 2019. I was like, when was that? It was a while back. And she was so, it was like, oh my gosh, I hadn't even thought about this. And what did you think when you were reading or
Fascinating.
listening? Isn't it
Very
fascinating?
fascinating, and things that you don't think about, and the world we live in. I've uh, done a lot of I've heard a lot of seminars, training on body language in general, but
Mhm.
this is a whole different layer.
Well, and it took me back to the body language conversations, the learning that we have about body language. Like you kind of know it instinctively, but you don't know it. Like you know what's kind of happening. But when somebody like presents it to you, it's like, oh, look at that. Like this makes sense. I get it now. And so then you understand it more. And that's what I thought about this book.
So Amy, for the listener, give the premise or the summary of, you're always so good at this, of digital body language and where she's coming from.
So it's a lot about the way we're communicating via email, text, even video conferencing, and the things that we're doing, how we're perceiving things, how others are perceiving things, the formality of relationships, the trust between relationships, and how you should communicate differently to different people and what you're putting out there. So it's about being a little bit more intentional about how you're communicating digitally,
The
I
only
would say.
thing, one thing that crossed my mind is back to not overthinking things, is it's all great to look at how you communicate and to who the receiver is, but how much more brain power has to go into every time. Usually we're trying to get a message out as quickly as possible. Um, so the devil's advocate part of me says, oh my gosh, are we going to be overthinking everything we send? But then in the same sense, I will tell you, my accountability partner and myself says, but Sandy, you always tell yourself, don't send a hasty reply. I get myself in trouble doing that. So maybe my devil's advocate needs to meet up with my accountability partner, and the two of them need to come to an agreement.
Well, good. Yeah. There are some things though, rules that we've heard historically that don't apply anymore.
Right.
And but talking about this hastiness really quick, we'll go to the rules
Yep.
that
Yep.
don't apply, but this hastiness, one of the things that she said is 2 hours and 20 minutes are wasted every day on digital drama. And it's us
Wow. Yeah, that's crazy.
like checking if somebody's replied, wondering, thinking about, we talked about this a little bit last week about, a quick text going back and forth. And is somebody angry, or did I, did I clarify, like, I need to follow up on this now because they haven't replied back in a certain amount of time.
Getting annoyed. Come on, let's keep this going. I want to check it off my list. Why have you not responded to me yet?
Right. Right. Completely. So I thought that was interesting how much time we're wasting. So if there's some clarity in the way we're communicating, so, please reply end of business, or please reply, within 4 days, things like that. So you can create digital clarity of, I don't need to reply right this minute. I understand you're busy or whatever, but I do need a reply by tomorrow at noon. And, you and I do that quite a bit with, just uploading videos and the sound and stuff like that. It's just like, it's not a rush, but, I'll go in or you'll go in and see something not there. It's like, okay, I do need this at some point.
How about the people who don't accept that, Amy? So I'll give an example. I try to be, okay, example be today. I'm packing. I've got a very important afternoon of getting my hair done and my nails done. But I do know that when I'm getting my hair done and my nails done, I'm not going to be able to respond. I can't, I'm talking with whatever, right?
Yeah,
Hands
right.
aren't free. And that would be an example of this morning, somebody saying, hey, can you look up for me, what they think is a real quick question. Well, we're taping right now. I've got to walk the dog. I got my son here. I know I can't get to it until, I'm going to take care of it before I leave for vacation, but I'm not going to look at it until 4. So
Yeah.
I'll try to communicate those things. And I'll tell you, I give it 50-50 on people that respect it versus not, meaning they don't say you have to do it now, but they'll respond. My response of, I can take a look at it after 4 o'clock today. We'll get back to you before the close of the night. That they'll continue the conversation, which, they don't say do it now, but maybe they'll ask in a way that you can get it quicker. I tell you, it's 50-50, those who purely respect that with a thanks or sounds good versus those that might ask a question that they think they can get a quicker answer out of, or can you look it up
Right.
right now? So how do you handle it when somebody doesn't respect when you put those boundaries in place?
So hilarious. I was just with someone last night and this was happening to them. We were at a show and they had gotten a text, someone asking them a question, and they're like, I can't reply. I don't have that answer and I can't look it up. I'm at a show. And then the person continued asking,
Asking
like,
in different ways.
yeah, in different ways, and kept engaging. And she was finally like, I'm putting my phone away
Right.
because they're obviously not getting the message. I'm at a show. Like, I'm like, so
And I think that's a great response. Put the phone
yeah,
away. You could don't keep engaging.
don't keep engaging. I think that's having clear boundaries and setting expectations. I always have this with my clients. I don't want my clients to think I'm available 24/7. So
Because
I
you're
have
not.
I'm not, and I'm not going to be. I have other things going on. So this is about us respecting our boundaries of, just because somebody's messaging us and texting us doesn't mean we have to reply. Like we can give ourselves, I am working during these hours, I reply during those hours, or I gave them an answer, but it's about respecting our own boundaries. I think this is a lot on us. It's not on other people.
It's a lot on us too, Amy, because this is one thing I do. And I think a lot of people are guilty of this. I guess I'm a pleaser because I'll be on, I know I can do something and I want to get it to them right away. And I set unrealistic expectations of myself of all the things I'm going to get out before I leave for vacation. And, is it really that drop dead that everything has to be done? Or a good example, and I was good about this, but I have to be very mindful about it because I am a pleaser when it comes to things like this. I was on the phone, had a call right before here. Oh, I'm thinking I know exactly how to do that. I know exactly how to, it was a report to create that he needed. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, it's so easy. Oh, the analytical side of me wants to see the data that's going to pull up. And I
Right.
wanted so badly to say, I'll get it to you before I leave. And I'm like, stop, you do not have time to add one more thing to your list without stressing yourself out. And that would go in that bucket of, I guess I've done it to myself because the digital drama, I've created digital drama for myself because I put in unrealistic expectation.
Yeah, and I think you're not alone. We all do it. We all think there's some urgency. There's this expectation. And so, at least I'm not going to say all of us, but a lot of us do. And I do it with some people. Some people I'm like, oh, you know, I want to reply back. Other people, I'm very clear. Like I keep the boundaries. So,
And it's a good message to ourselves. I take a day. One thing that I would really recommend for everybody is take a day and just tell yourself, I'm going on everything, whether I can get it done, whether it will make me feel good to check the box. That's my husband. Get it out of my email box. Get it, don't add something to my box because I want to check it off. For
yeah,
me, it's because I want to please. And sometimes I just want to see the outcome, like, oh, that's really cool. I want to get that done because I want to see what's going to come of it. But just say no to everything and then reassess your happiness factor at the end of the day. Because one thing I'll tell you, a game changer for me that I am kind of at this Zen level of a high level of being happy is I have really stopped doing a lot of those unrealistic expectations. I've relieved the fire drill in my day by a variety of different things, things that we've
mhm,
picked up for atomic habits from growth mindset by saying time with my mom when my kids call, not always being so haggard I can't talk to them, right? And how that has increased my happiness and my well-being by doing that. So do the exercise and assess how better your day went.
right, right. Yeah, exactly. And you can set aside times to come back to it. Okay, let's talk about a little bit of this body language piece because that was more like about boundaries and
Right.
and our digital life in general, which is just our life these days. I
Right.
feel like it's everything is there. So some of the things that's going on in body language is we're communicating, um, people are perceiving things different depending on who it's coming from and what the relationship, whether it's a formal relationship, whether there's trust, whether there's all sorts of things that go into consideration when you're communicating with people. And so having rules, but there's rules around communicating and different levels of power and who you're communicating with. But there's also these unconscious biases
Mhm.
that's happening when you're receiving, and it can happen through generational. It can happen male, female. It happens culturally, which that was kind of the stuff in the book that really was like, oh, this is really interesting. When she did a presentation, she did a text and it was, gosh, I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was like oh, I know what it was. It was okay. It was someone typed out okay, someone did K period, someone did, uh, that's great. Or, it was like went through all these examples. And she was like, which one resonates with you? One person did it all caps, okay, exclamation point. And it was just like, all right, what are you thinking about all these? And it was very interesting, the emotions that I felt looking at each of these differently.
And having the bias. I think the bias was a great point too. I listening to a book, reading a book, they're all blending together a little bit now, but one of them talked about how every school should be teaching uh, basically how we pick up these biases and show and demonstrate how the biases exist and uh, how to understand that they're out there as we make decisions and how we view other people.
Yeah.
Really, uh, what's the formal word for it? It's bias training, but it's really having a comprehension that it does exist in you, because so many people say, well, that's not me, I'm not like that. And then there's so many exercises that will show, and this would be a good example of that, how we become biased because generationally, uh, age, male, female, all the different things, that it does exist in most of us, and
Completely.
acknowledging that.
So here's a good example of that. Imagine you get a text message, a work text message, okay? And it's got a bunch of emojis. Okay.
Uh-huh.
So if it comes from a man, How does it make you feel? Typically, you would say, oh, he's being friendly,
It's
you
being
know?
friendly. Yeah.
Yeah. If it came from a young woman, how would you feel?
Oh, isn't she cute?
Well, cute, unprofessional,
Right.
like, right? Exactly. And that's one of the examples she gave about biases that we would have just as a, just, and I was like, yeah, that's exactly how I would feel. If a man texted me emojis, I'm like, oh, thank you. He's being friendly. He's being informal. He's being, creating trust, creating collaboration, but a young woman, if she was text, I would be like, well, she needs to be more professional. I would be a little bit harsher on it.
And I'd be for generational if it came from, what would be an example? Think about when I think of older people and they send a text and maybe they're still using the you, something that was 10 years ago, the you,
Caps.
yeah, all caps. I would originally think, oh, they're old and they're not tech savvy. You know,
Right. Exactly.
I'm not going to communicate like, oh, good, right away. I would think that way. But if it came from a middle-aged man, I think he's just in a hurry. He's busy.
Right. Yes. I know. We have these perceptions and we have to check ourselves.
And even with women, I got to tell you, I think I'm a huge female advocate and back to pulling each other up, but I will find myself, it's like, right. I find myself that, I'm being territorial on something, or I think I'm right about something. And would I be the same for a female to a man? Because I think I tend to be more open-minded to the man, whether I tend to be a little harder on the female. I find myself doing that I
Yeah.
think I need to, I don't know if it's battle's a word. And again, I think I'm pretty good about it, but I do find those biases where I have to ask myself, are you trying to prove yourself, or would you have done the same thing to a male versus a female?
That's interesting.
But I think it's part of our interactions too, because I have more conversations with females. So again, I'm purely a female advocate.
Yeah.
And I'm definitely a person who lifts other people up, but I find myself interacting differently when we have different points of view with a female versus a male. And it's not that I'm bowing down to the male, but I do find that bias. And I think it's seated in the fact that with women, I tend to have more open conversations to get to the answer. But if the woman doesn't know me, it doesn't necessarily come across that way. So I check myself and say, how are you coming across? Are you coming across like you're challenging her and treat everybody the same? But that's back to making an unconscious bias a conscious bias. So I'm not doing that. And she doesn't know me. If it was you and I, we know each other. It's a conversation, but how am I coming across to a female who doesn't know me?
Right.
Because she's probably been challenged a lot in her life, because that's what happens, right? And am I bringing her up, or am I holding her down because of my tone?
Interesting. But what a good thing to have that awareness about how you're communicating, and so that you can make sure, because it's all about the end game. It's not like sometimes we're doing things in the moment, but we can adjust to get the end game, the final result, and so that there's clear communication. So one of the rules that I was raised with, and I'm sure you were too, was exclamation points, especially for women. Quit putting exclamation points in your writing. All right.
But I like, and I tend to be, and I like emojis too. And I'm like, screw it. Honestly, I think it was Glennon Doyle who said that too. Somebody, they're like, I was told, maybe it was Katie Couric, and she's like, sorry, I like them. I'm leaving them in. So I have been told, but I don't always follow it. How about that?
Well, and it's now acceptable. That is like the general rule of leave the exclamation points in. If you said that's exciting, period, via text, people would be like, well, she's obviously not feeling it. Right?
Oh, that's exciting. It's a monotone.
Right. Right. So I was pretty happy about that we can do exclamation points and it's accepted.
Yay. I like my
Yay.
explanation points.
Right. Yay. Um, so what about, have you noticed any cultural differences? Do you work with international at all?
On occasion, right now I'm not. Um, but yes, I definitely do on occasion, but not ongoing. How about you?
On occasion, I have one person I communicate who's in the Caribbean with work or I communicate via work. It's a professional and Caribbean. And what I have learned is they don't text message. They
I don't think I've gotten many texts now that you say that.
they voice message via text. So it's a recorded voice instead of typing,
Right.
which I'm always like, this is so interesting. So it's actually fun. I've done it a few times now and I'm like, okay, this isn't bad, but um
Boy, that helped me a
culturally,
lot, actually.
yeah, culturally, that's what some culture, I mean, I think there's all sorts of things different cultures do and how they read text and how they read emails and things like that. But I just thought that was kind of an interesting thing that's been going on that I've seen in
You know,
communication.
I guess this does fall on the bias that, yeah, I guess this would be an unconscious bias. I made a phone call for, it was basically a customer service call. And the person who answered the phone, I could tell was from another country. And I immediately was like, are you freaking kidding me?
Oh yeah,
Because my initial was just from the tone of their voice that they weren't going to understand me, that they weren't going to hear me. And it ended up being an extremely pleasant conversation. And at the end, I thought, what a horrible bias I had that I just almost got stiff the minute I heard them say their name, because I assumed they weren't, yeah, that I wasn't going to be heard. They weren't
right,
going to understand. And they hired some people that don't understand what the customer needs. That was, I mean, right away. But I'm
right.
guessing I'm not the only person who feels that way, but it was a great conversation. But it was the tone of it was hearing the voice that I immediately jumped to that conclusion.
I think a lot of people do that. You know, they hear a certain accent and they're like, I'm not dealing with somebody at the company. I'm dealing with an
And it's,
overseas company.
and for me, it's not about that they're overseas, it's the communication. They're not going to understand, I'm not going to understand them. They're not going to understand me. They're not going to understand my problem because they're not here. It's a communication and understanding is my bias. Because I've had bad experiences with that before, but that's where bias comes from, right?
Right.
That's where
Exactly.
bias comes from, is by having that bad experience, being able to say, now I have set that for every conversation I have with somebody foreign when it's customer service. And
Right.
it actually was, actually a blog that I'm writing because it was a great conversation, because talk about communication and perception. I was spelling something for her and she had started by, and this is good because she had a different dialect. When she was giving me a particular word, she started saying, A is for apple, and then B, and she was using words to say to do the spelling. So
Right.
I followed her lead. It was off of an insurance card, which of course we know there are a lot of letters. So I was following her lead. And when I got to H, I said H is for happy. And for M, I said M is for mom. And you go through, it's a psychological study.
Yeah.
And we got done and she said, you're the first person ever who said H is for happy. And she is on all these calls. And she said, that's just really interesting. And I said, what do they usually say? I can't remember. I was glad it wasn't hate, but it was, I can't remember what the word was. I wrote it down because it was I thought, what an interesting study that she listens to what people say. And she said, and I rarely hear mom. And she said, you must be really happy. Did you spend time with your mom? I'm like talking to a psychologist off of the words I'm using. But she said, people tend to get in a mood and they'll use there are very common words that people will use when they go through the alphabet. And I'm happy to be the first person who said H is for happy.
I love that. That's
But
awesome.
how smart for her, I love that if you think about for her being a very good customer service agent, that she sets the tone by saying A is for Apple, because that will help in communicating with each other. And so I followed her lead by doing that rather than not understanding. So she led it without saying it. And then she interjected something that might be her conversation starter with people. Who knows? But very fascinating how she broke down that bias immediately. And because it likely was going to be an uncomfortable conversation, because every insurance card is different. I mean, it cannot be an easy thing to read off a card and get a number wrong. And I even asked her, a 0 versus an O, why do they even use that in here? How do you know? The O many times, ma'am, is round, and the 0 is more elongated. I'm like, okay, it's a 0. And I was going to fake the accent, but my son told me that that is a very bad thing to do. You're not supposed to do accents anymore. Which, if I did it, I wasn't trying to do it to be bad, but you're not to do that.
Right. I've heard that too. Like, don't even try to impersonate people.
No.
Yes. So wanted to kind of wrap this up is this digital body language. One of the things is to think before you send, pause, reread your message. I do this a lot I'm usually very right to the point. So I start an email and I jump right to the point, and then I usually afterwards I come back and I'm like, all right, I need to put hope you're having a good day.
That's good feedback rather than, no, that's wrong because.
Right, exactly. So it's interesting. I always know that about myself. I have a girlfriend, a colleague, but she's also a really good friend. And she is the most, actually, to her emails sometimes almost pain me, because I'm like, okay, can we just get to the point? Because her body language is so friendly digitally, because it's like a warm embrace in the beginning and talking about your family. Then she'll get to the meat of it. And then she closes with another warm embrace. And I'm always like, okay, where's the meat? But it's lovely. And I love her. But I know that about myself when I reply back. I always have to fluff it up a little and just take my time to communicate her style so that she doesn't think I'm just really abrupt.
That's a great point. And I think too is remembering back to how language can be misconstrued is by answering, you've invited yourself to participate in a conversation. So if you're in a big hurry and you're gonna, number one, you can sound abrupt. Number two, you're contributing to a conversation that you can't continue. So, I mean, you're going to start a conversation with somebody and the whole time they're going to be, I'm busy with something else. I've got to go. So wait until you can have a conversation. That's one part of it too, because that's respectful to the other side. Because if you can't respond, and that's why putting the phone away when she gave I'm at a show, don't continue the conversation because you can't respect that conversation.
Right.
And don't start one that you can't end or that you can't fulfill till the end.
Right, exactly. Yeah. The other piece is, along with thinking, pausing, keep being authentic, keep being who you are. Don't fake it. Don't fake that you're this formal person. Don't fake that you're a young, hip 20-year-olds and don't just be yourself. But know your audience and making sure that you're being respectful of them and that they're not, you're not giving them an opportunity to judge you, or assume things about you because of the way you're communicating.
That's a great point. It's know your audience and be you.
Right. Adapt, but still be unique. That was one of the things that she had mentioned. Anything else that you caught on this?
No, a lot of good, simple reminders. I think you just summed the best ones up right there. We all communicate all throughout the day digitally, and be your authentic self, know your audience, and take a breath, you know. No electronic media conversations in a hurry, because you don't have the benefit of seeing the other person, because usually that will take your guard down too. Is
Right.
you might be in a hurry, you might be stressed, whatever, but that takes some of the drama out, because you're right there and you can read the other person and say, oh, they got a lot going on, or there's so many ways you can read that. So you have to be more careful.
Yeah. And don't make assumptions about things that are not in the text
Right.
or the message. Because sometimes, we read reasons, we assume reasons. If it says, can you take out the trash? It doesn't mean I'm mad because you haven't taken the trash. Like it can't, it's not all this. It's just like,
And know when to stop digitally. That's the other thing I'd say, because there's a
Right.
lot of times I'd say, we should probably, let's all jump on a Zoom call and do a problem resolution, because it's not going to work itself out in this group email. Or does everybody have time? It doesn't have to be an hour. That's the other thing. People have gotten into this Zoom. It's, because it's built in as a 1 hour slot. Oh, I don't have time for another Zoom. You know what? Let's 15 minutes. We can jump on. It can be quick. It doesn't have to be an hour long conversation.
Right. Completely agree. Awesome.
Or a phone call.
These are some great things to be thinking about, and just continuing noticing your biases, your
Yep.
perceptions, and yeah, very good.
All right, Amy, hopefully I have some life-changing events that I can check the box and tell you about post Hawaii too.
Oh, I can't wait to hear about it. Have a great trip.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.